Genius, right? All right, well then it's 6:03 p.m. and let's call this special meeting to order, and we will start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is everybody at this meeting? Yeah, maybe.
I think the only person that we're missing right now are Jan and Jim. And Jan said she was going to join, so hopefully she's just running a little late.
Okay.
But we knew Jim wasn't going to be able to make it. All right, so let's jump right in. Jan and Julie, capital maintenance projects.
So we are, this is sort of anticlimactic, though we did do additional work on this project today. Every year, both facilities and budget and fiscal committee have heard from us. Every year we look at capital projects, particularly if there's any kind of surplus in the current year, 1920, this year, the 1920 budget, and there is. And we look at, are there one-time expenses that we could fund with the 1920 money, or, you know, should the surplus remain as is? This year is a very unusual year. There's a significant surplus right now. But as Commissioner Cardona has said in a number of meetings with superintendents, there really are no surpluses this year because next year promises to be a very unusual, unpredictable, and most likely expensive year. We anticipate, given some of the alternatives that we will need to consider, potentially additional staffing expenses, transportation expenses, facility expenses, retrofitting of facilities, PPE, certainly personal protective equipment, and potentially even compensatory education expenses. Very hard to predict which of these will come to fruition. And before we go into this, I just want to say that I believe, I can't remember which meeting, but I believe it was last night, I was asked about whether we'd be getting any CARES Act money. And today we learned that we will be getting additional CARES Act money. The state got 111 million, and Saybrook should be getting just over 100,000. And that they want us to earmark for educational. Title I, it would be educational, making instruction possible. You know, and of course, the final thing to talk about is what will our education format look like next year? And so this year, Mrs. Pendleton and I are recommending that we take more dollars than typical and pull some capital projects out of the 2021 and even in some cases the 21-22 year. Why only capital projects? And I know most of you know this, but for the benefit of anyone who might be listening, because they are one-time expenses. If we were to pull paper and books and pencils and basketballs and softballs out of the regular operations budget, we would be artificially inflating the operations budget, the board's budget in perpetuity, which certainly we want to avoid because then we'll never have an accurate figure. So we always move to what we call, quote, one-time purchases, and capital purchases are often 95 to 99% of that. So Mrs. Pendleton and I worked together, and Mrs. Pendleton finally drafted has a final draft of a list of items that we are planning for this year's end of year purchases. And those are available in your book, and I believe they were also emailed to you. So unless someone has a question for me, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Pendleton to walk you through what those items are. Are there any questions? Okay. So Chairman Barros, I will turn it over to Mrs. Pendleton.
Okay, well, thank you. So budget and fiscal and facilities has both committees have seen most of this list so far. Starting with Goodwin School, what we tried to do was separate them out on this memo between capital plan purchases, which are the things that are in your capital plan portion of the budget book specific to those things we tend to call more capital projects. Starting with Goodwin School has carpeting for the media center, the library area, and the principal's office. A lot of that's going to be a combination of the flooring, like our office that we did this past year with the LVT, which is the those boards. They look like boards, but they're really vinyl, very low maintenance. And then we'll have a little bit of carpeting just in the area where kids sit and read. And that was something that Heston had asked if we could, keep the carpet down to a lower level instead of carpeting everything. It tends to absorb so much of the air and the moisture, if you will, in that building. So that's the plan for Goodwin. And then the principal's office will also be the LVT as well. The gym floor is no surprise. That bid came in at $57,872. That was a formal bid that just closed last week. There's money for furniture, and this is the only one that Jen and I both kind of have a question mark on at this time, because we don't know what next year is going to bring as far as how classrooms will have to be configured and set up. So certain furniture, as you know, will work better than others. The integration of furniture in the past several years has been to go to more tables and things of that nature. That's not as conducive to setting classrooms up if we have to separate kids and have distance. So we're really looking at that, going to take particular note on what that purchase may look like and determine whether or not it makes sense to wait. Right now they have desks in the 4th grade, traditional desks. And so we may just have to see what alternatives are available. The next 3 items were not part of the capital plan, but they are capital items, which is why they're listed here. 2 of them are shade pavilions, one for the pre-K playground, which tends to be in the direct sun most of the day. And then the sandbox, which is, if you look at the library and you look out, it's that little play area in there as well. Again, that gets pretty much sun most of the day. So these are shade pavilions. They're maintenance-free, vinyl, basically posts with a roof, a pavilion-looking structure. And then in going through the media center with the principal, the furniture in the media center, when we start to move it for the flooring, it's in pretty rough shape. So that's on the list to replace those with similar tables that are in there, and they would match the tables that are in the library area as well.
Hey, Julie, I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
Just from a space perspective at Goodwin, I know we moved 4th grade down there last year. Do we still have plenty of room? Are there empty, unused classrooms at the elementary school, or are we pretty much using all the space we've got there?
We're filled to capacity as far as I know. Jan, do you I don't think there's an empty classroom there that I'm aware of.
We are using some classrooms. We have some classrooms that are set up for smaller groups still, not to the degree that we did. So if we had to make some shifts, we still could, but it would be tight.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, I probably should know this, but what's our average class size at Goodwin?
So the pre-K and kindergartens are in the below 15, and our largest classes are up around 19 and 20. Next year, depending upon what happens in grade 3, I think we may have classes large as about 21.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the middle school, there's one capital item there. It actually would accelerate that capital purchase over the 3 years that I have listed there. And that's to finish the countertops and cabinet refurbishing that we started. There's one wing left, and then there's two bathrooms in the 7th and 8th grade wing that are in pretty tough shape that need new bathroom sinks and countertops there. So that would complete that, to have something that looks universal throughout the building at that point. Onto the high school. So there, we have kind of a little golden opportunity here. When they did the building project, they ordered far too many carpet squares. So what we would propose to do there would be a lot of the offices, guidance and main office, main areas will be the LVT, so that flooring once again. And we would use the carpet squares we have, which are brand new in the box still, and we will put those, we will replace those in the office areas and guidance, and in the two conference rooms in the main office for a little bit of sound absorption, so it's not all hard surfaces there. Proposal for the high school carpet. The lab furniture is furniture for one lab that is upstairs in the high school. That's what Carabelle teaches, and it's configured for new tables that are more conducive to the teaching style that goes on in her classroom. And then we started doing high school partition replacements in the bathroom with Corian. We find that Corian is very, very tough, very strong, and can't really dent it very easily. So that worked out really well, and those are very durable. So we have a proposal that's for 4 more bathrooms to be completed. And each bathroom, as you know, has 2 to 4 stalls in it. So quite a few doors being replaced there. A mowing trailer, which is the trailer that carries all of our big equipment, mowers and lining machines and things like that. And then we go into the other category, and that is an expense that the town has told us we will have to endure this year because they changed banks. And because they changed banks, we have to have modifications to the software for our finance program. So it's an upgrade of almost $14,000, which we had no knowledge of or had no way of knowing that we were going to have to do that. So it was not budgeted. So I put it on this spending plan because obviously better to take it out of this year's funds. We have no idea next year where we'll land with that. And then the next group of expenses are equipment, supplies, and repairs. So not capital purchases per se, but some, equipment items that are considered perhaps a little bit larger than the normal. Some of them are just small things like a couple of instruments at the middle school, a couple of saws, fixing a fan in the kiln room. We also do some updates and some resurfacing to our bathroom tile. It's called Santa Glaze. It's a special system that has restored the old tile in those buildings to brand new. They look wonderful. And this is sort of a, not a redo, but what would you call it? Like a, when you just sand and recoat your floors versus sanding them all the way down to the wood. This is kind of a recoat of the finish to keep them nice and shiny. And easy to clean. And of course, we're looking at all those cleaning points as we go into this next year. Custodial supplies, I made a note there to just kind of give you, it's not an all-inclusive list, but you can see the kinds of things that we have been purchasing. Things like paint, wax, plexiglass to make shields for the offices, masks, gloves, gowns, on and on. You can see a long list of items. In technology, these will be these funds will be used for the 700 Chromebooks that are going to be purchased, along with the software, cases, the insurance plans for if they should break, and all the peripheral kinds of things that need to go with that. And then I think somebody was mentioning earlier, Janet, you were talking about, the configuration of classrooms. So one of the things that the director of technology has been doing is making sure we have wireless access points and drops where they need to be. And so we'll be adding several of those to accommodate all the wireless devices that will now be in the hands of students. So adding more to places like gymnasiums, auditoriums, where we may have to spread students out. Cafeterias, those areas are all going to be enough wireless access points should we need to use those areas for instruction. So that's a pretty, overall description of what we're looking to use the funds for this year and the projects that we would like to go forward with. Only one of them actually requires a bid waiver, and it's the countertops and cabinets and sink tops, so that we can continue with the same, it's customized work. It's, we want to use the same quality of construction that we've had, the same materials, the same process. And so that would be one vendor that has done the work, that has done a beautiful job, that we've been very pleased with. That would be the only item that needs an actual bid waiver. I did put the carpeting on there because that's a local vendor, and partly because we're using some of our own product. Not everybody, the commercial guys won't even come in and look at you and use, if you're using your own product, they want to sell you products. So that was not at the threshold, but close to it. So I wanted to put that on here as well.
So just a quick question, how does this align, because I didn't do my homework and I should have, with what we've done for kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, with moving capital expenses into past years? Like, where does this kind of align from a
So it's a great question. Jan and I actually went through this with a fine-tooth comb. So you can see I've noted the years in which those items are budgeted. And so this is really helping us kind of complete a number of the items that have been ongoing. And obviously when you do small numbers and small amounts of a project, it's less cost effective. So when we can do like cabinets and get a whole wing done, that is, always much better for us. So it's accelerated it a bit. But as you know, like in your capital projects, we will have, I'm sure, several projects to replace these. Some will come in its place. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Tara, or not to what you were.
It answered one of my questions, but I was just wondering, from like a totals perspective, like in past years when we've had the opportunity to move more projects, like what did the numbers look like for that? Does this, kind of align with, what we've done in the past as far as, volume of the total?
If I could, I think I can provide some context for that, Julie, and then you can try after me too. But it depends upon the surplus that we have in the spring. It depends upon the capital projects that are anticipated. A couple of differences this year. One is the unusual year and the surplus. Two is the expectation that next year is going to be so awful, quite honestly. I can't even say it any other way. And three is that large purchase of technology, which probably bumped us into a much higher category than we typically expend at this point every year. Part of this activity that we engage in every year is money that we have held back on spending all year in the areas of technology and infrastructure to safeguard our current year budget. And so that exercise itself is typical. The dollar amount is atypical. But you can see that large sum in technology is about preparation for what we are being told is the inevitable in the coming year. The other thing that drives how much we might move for our capital project into the current year is the type of project that we have planned for the summer. So we've had some paving projects, and paving is incredibly expensive. So if we have some money in a 1920 in the current year budget, we'll bridge the two and do part of it, start the project in June, do part of it in June, do part of it with the new budget in July. So it is very dependent upon the year, the financial situation, and the projects that we have scheduled. What's unusual this year, which is why we're walking through it so carefully to be completely transparent, is the amount that we have left this year is higher, and our expectations for expenses next year is also higher. So we're trying to control any volatility in next year's budget.
That makes sense. Thanks, Jan. That definitely answers my question.
Last year, we had the big high school paving project. So that was a huge chunk last year, but that's atypical. I think, what Jan's explanation sort of stated was more about, a typical year. And this is definitely one of those years that's not as typical as well.
It's the most atypical year we've ever seen.
I was trying to be nice.
Only to be followed by another atypical year, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So Julie, if any Baker, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Hi, how are you?
Good.
So a question, I'm curious because you're talking about Corian for the high school bathroom partitions. It's really strong. Is that what's there now and you're just continuing it or replacing it with that?
So we have 4 bathrooms that now have the Corian replacement, but in the past they've been metal and they just
I
they
understand.
don't hold up, for the number. These will hold up for a very long time. And the beauty of Corian is if they get scratched or whatever, you take them down, they get resanded, you put them right back up. So they'll have a much longer life.
I know the material well, and you're right. I'm just curious to know, is that more expensive than putting in, like metal? Corian,
Yes,
Corian
it most definitely is,
because
but it will
Corian
give you the longevity.
I know, it also is very elegant. Thanks. Simulates marble.
So other questions for Jan and Julie?
A question for Jan and Julie, and in terms, you mentioned it last night that the within the board's right to expend up to 2% of the budget for capital. Did I get that right, or could you explain that a little more?
Sure. No, Alan, the 2% is carryover. The state allows us to carry over from our operating budget from one fiscal year to another up to 2% of the total budget. Because obviously this is not an unusual situation. Well, this is an unusual situation, but it's not unusual in some years for a Board of Education to find itself with a surplus. And rather than lose the money, the state allows us to carry that much over. And that's a relatively new law. It was 1% for many years, and it's just been increased to 2%.
Thank you.
Other questions for Jan and Julie?
If I could just add one more thing, I'm sorry, probably someone does have a question, but that 2%, by the way, is carried over on the town side. So whatever dollars we ask to have carried over, we would ask to have put in our sinking fund on the town side, and the Board of Finance, and hopefully the town would be willing to allow us to do that. Again, it's our only way of protecting ourselves from the day when the roof blows off of a school or all the boilers go down in a school, or God forbid there's a flood. I don't mean to sound like Mrs. Catastrophe tonight, but those are the things that we are trying to, to prepare ourselves for, or something cyclical like a turf field replacement, not the field itself, but the carpet. Those are things that rather than going out and bonding or loading them into an operating budget in a given year, which really would be imprudent, they're there in the sinking fund, and we're able to access that money by going through a process where we approach the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen with our questions.
And for those of you that are newer to the board, about the old story about the board taking out a very large maintenance bond. So we collectively, you as the board, Jan, we worked really, really hard to come up with these kinds of things so that we aren't looking at a $2 million maintenance bond, every 10 years. That's ludicrous. So it just seems as though we have to really have a philosophical discussion and make sure that we're all on the same page. I think the board is and has always supported it, but that's the reason for a lot of these projects being on a capital plan, seeing that they're coming up, knowing what's coming in the future. It's a plan, and it's, every plan changes like it does in your own house. Your roof, your roof's going to need replacing, and you just decide how many years you can stretch it. It's the same for us.
This is George.
Go ahead, George.
So, a couple of questions. So tonight's presentation, I presume is going to be a prelude to a presentation to the Board of Finance?
I think that's what they have asked for. This year they have asked for a presentation on our capital projects. So yes.
So that's a new request compared to previous years?
I think it has to do more with what's our year-end money look like as well.
I see.
Probably a combination, Jan, do you think?
I think so. I think that we have a neighboring town that reduced their budget by 1.2 million. And so I think that probably sparks some question, probably appropriate question in the minds of some folks. The rest of that story, by the way, is the $1.2 million reduction was that I believe they moved a capital project, tennis courts, into the current year. So kind of the same process that we're going through with a slightly different variation on it. And that's a regional school district, so their financials are a little bit different.
I'm just trying to remember from last year. So the high school paving certainly was a large expense, but that was budgeted already, right? It was.
No, that actually was part of the sinking fund, but because we had a large surplus, we were able to do that project out of operating funds.
Okay, yeah, because I remember last year we had a pretty sizable surplus. I mean, compared to this year, it's pretty minor, but at that time it was pretty sizable, and it didn't. I don't recall the Board of Finance being particular about having us present prior to us using it. And so it's certainly been a change in mentality, I guess.
I think it's been building. If I had to say what I think it's been building over the last couple of years. We've reported the projects, we've told them, we've always been very transparent about it. I think it also has to do with some legislation that talks to boards of education informing the legislative body, being the Board of Finance, of expenditures such as this. So I think it's been building for a few years. Jan, your take on it?
Yeah, well, Mrs. Pendleton and I are committed to finding out what the genesis of these questions are. So I know we discussed this, I think, with Budget and Fiscal Committee, that we'd like to get to the bottom of it, because certainly the books are there and they're wide open for people to see. As a matter of fact, the exercise that Julie and I went through today was to make sure that every item just presented to you was somewhere in the capital budget. And if it wasn't somewhere in the capital budget, that we identified it as such, so that it's completely clear what we're doing and that we're able to explain why we're doing it. I wouldn't want to hazard a guess as to what the genesis of the questions is, but we are certainly committed to finding out and to finding a new way to answer it. Our new budget presentation this year was really an attempt to address lack of clarity or perceived lack of clarity. And I know we got excellent feedback from members of the Board of Finance and from all of you about that. But I think there must still be some lingering questions. And I think, George, that it's exacerbated this year by the fact that everybody knows that we have been closed down. This is no secret. We have been closed down since March. And I think I'm hearing from colleagues across the state is that there is this belief that there is a ton of money out there, and in some ways I'm sure there is. But our message is what we are seeing as a surplus this year will very likely be quickly absorbed next year. So our only mechanism as a Board of Education and administration, our only mechanism is to safeguard next year's budget by moving things out of next year's budget. And we are not willing to move items that we purchase on a regular basis. So it becomes the capital project purchases pretty much exclusively. We could have gone ahead and said, let's see if we can stretch this and purchase all our computers K-12, but we know what that will do to the board's operating budget a few years out when they all need to be replaced. So that has to be done, in a cyclical way. So we're not only thinking about next year's budget and safeguarding it, but we're looking out 2, 3, and 4 years and trying to safeguard those budgets as well.
Right. I'm also just thinking about the timing situation, right? I mean, we're halfway through May already, and it's my understanding that we cannot pick up any more projects because of bandwidth in terms of being able to do it. And I'm just going to make a guess that most of these projects will need to be started at least before the end of June.
Yes.
So all these projects need to start in the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And the question is, if the process needs to go through a Board of Finance and they have to deliberate, and there's a time component there as well, that we hopefully don't lose the ability to start by the end of June.
I don't think there's a mechanism for the Board of Finance to alter this. Our budget has been accepted, and the mill rate has been set for the community. I think I would assume, and I want to caution, I'm making a guess based on what I'm hearing across the state from superintendents and Board of Education side. I'm making a guess that they're trying to determine, are there revenues, are there any dollars that will come to the town from the Board of Education? Because I think that, and I'm sure that this is reasonable on the town sides around us. They're concerned about being able to collect taxes when people are, underemployed or unemployed, businesses are closed. There are lots of federal and state executive orders saying you can't pressure people to pay their rent or pay their taxes. And Park and Rec will be closed, and lots of things that could be revenue generators. They're also trying to safeguard the town side budget from those same unknowns. So striking the balance is really important. This is not, as you all know, this is not the total of the surplus at this time. We're still figuring out the dollars and seeing what's left. We're still anticipating. I know this sounds, I think we're very conservative, Julie and I, and we're concerned that it is only the middle of May and we're here together on this budget until the end of June. And I really don't want to assume that everything's going to be fine moving forward. No one's going to get sick. We're not going to incur huge expenses. I don't know. And I don't know when something could come out of the state that will require Julie to do all kinds of unusual things to our buildings to prepare them for the fall, in which case we'll be, looking for dollars in whatever budget we can find it. And we are anticipating these things, and I've said this message over and over again all spring. We're towing up to the line, and then we don't execute completely because we just don't know. But I think the same is true on the municipal side. I'm assuming they must be feeling the same way.
Right.
I think that's a very accurate representation of where they may be coming from, and the fear that we heard it at least once at one Board of Finance meeting. There was definitely some reservation and fear.
Right, and there's certainly some items on this list that will touch some nerves for them. So
yeah. Well, it is certainly appropriate for this Board of Education to say, I wouldn't recommend that you do that one. The one that I think will probably be contentious is the gym floor.
I was going to say that.
Yeah. I'll let Julie speak for herself, but I think that's one that Julie would like to start early because of the project itself, and because we just have this golden opportunity while nobody's in the buildings. But that's I don't want to speak for Julie. Maybe Julie, you could say whether or not you think that's something that could be moved out of 1920 if the board recommends it.
I mean, let's say this project starts this week. We could make a final decision on the payment of that between June 30th and July 1st, because it's going to be a fairly lengthy process. So if that was one that the board felt they wanted to just put on the list, but kind of hold it at bay, there's flexibility there for sure. It's on the list because when we spoke about how are we going to safeguard some funds for the kinds of things that we don't even know might be facing us, capital items are really the only large ticket items or place to go that you might be able to find some money. So that's why it's on there. Is there flexibility? Sure. There's always flexibility. It's just we felt we might need those dollars for next year. So.
But I mean, if I remember listening in, there were a lot of questions about it, but I think that you and Jan really justified why we needed a Goodwin floor, and I think reset some people's understandings of why. And
yeah, I think we did get over that hump. I think this will be more about, oh, see, you have the money in this year's budget and you budgeted it next year, and that's going to be the controversy. And our reasoning is simply because these funds are being safeguarded for the things we don't know that may come our way next year.
all right, there you go.
So I do have a procedural question though, Jane and Julie. So, obviously the purpose of tonight's meeting was to discuss this with the board and get feedback from the board. But should the board agree that some or all of these should move forward, from an authorization perspective, you need the board to approve the, waiver for the one project and probably the other one too, just to be on the safe side, the bid waiver. But this is something that is the board's purview to decide, is it not?
It absolutely is, sure. I would say it is.
So to George's point, if we have things that need to get started expeditiously, obviously we want to inform, as soon as we can, our financial situation in the Board of Finance. That's, I get it from a town perspective. I'm sure they are concerned, just like we are, honestly. So, but to George's point, if we've got something that's time sensitive, if that's the board's decision to move forward with this, then, that's the answer.
And we don't need Board of Finance approval for this, correct?
No.
Yeah, I certainly see that.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Eileen.
I
Sorry.
was going to say, just to make a motion to move this entire list forward.
So I think from a procedural perspective, we have to do a motion, for the bid waiver.
Okay, go ahead.
And do we need the bid waiver, just as a point of reference, to be separate for the cabinets and the carpet, or can we do them?
You can take the waiver. You can authorize the waiver for those two items.
Okay.
Together.
So is there further, before I put forth to ask for a motion, is there further discussion from the board, further questions, concerns? Alan, I love that cat. I think the cat's got a question.
She's hungry. She's hungry.
You obviously missed her dinner time.
Yes.
Awesome. Right there, that's awesome. All right, so hearing no further questions or discussions from the board, then I'll ask for a motion for a bid waiver covering the carpeting and bathroom partition projects. Did I get that right?
Yep. Bathroom partition,
So moved.
the middle school cabinets and counters, and the carpet.
Thank you. Moved by Alan. Do we have a second?
Second, Jan Furman.
Seconded by Jan Furman. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so moved. And then Jan, I don't believe we need a waiver, or not a waiver. Do we need a motion for approval of the rest of it to move forward?
So not typically, right, Mrs. Townsend? We don't typically get a motion from the board.
They don't need to, but if that, they can endorse the
Right.
list if they wanted to.
Right.
But it's
Yeah.
not required.
So do we feel, does anybody on the board feel the desire to put forth a motion to endorse the capital plan purchases as presented?
If it shows further support, I'll make a motion.
Moved by Eileen,
I'll second.
This is George. I don't think we need to set a different precedence for what is being a practice.
fair enough, George. I think that's a fair point. I agree with you. I think if the board agrees and we had ample time for discussion and we put it out there, it's been through one committee already and it's not something that generally requires a motion. I agree with you. All right.
So, sorry, does that mean we will not be moving forward with the second motion?
That's correct, Trent.
Thank
So
you.
shall we, just for a case of being official, just withdraw the second and withdraw the motion?
Yeah, I think there wasn't a second for the motion, but Eileen, do you mind withdrawing the motion?
It's fine, thanks.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you for the support, though. I
Yeah, we
appreciate the effort.
appreciate it very much.
You're
And
welcome.
I anticipate that we were asked to come to the Board of Finance on May 19th. I'm participating in something that evening for work, and so we can't be there. But I anticipate that we'll be invited to a Board of Finance meeting, maybe the one after that, or even after that. And we will present what we have ready at this time. Certainly this information can be shared. If we are far enough down the road of understanding what our surplus, what our end of year surplus is, when we get in front of the Board of Finance, we will share that as well. And of course, we'll let all of the Board of Education members know when that is.
Excellent. Thank you. So just from a reminder perspective, we have a May 16th Board of Education meeting. And with that, any questions,
wait.
comments?
May 16th?
No, not May
May
16th.
26th, sorry. Thanks,
Thank
Karen.
you.
God, we would be on
Too
overload.
soon, way too soon.
Yeah, if it was the 26th, I would come. It's the 26th, not the 16th, sorry. I don't
Okay.
know where I had that date on my mind. I don't know. We can have a meeting that night if you guys want to.
No, it's not.
The weekend.
Thank you, Alan. George?
Sorry, I missed the Board of Finance discussion. So they have a Board of Finance on May 19th, but you indicated that you will not be present, that you will not be able to make it that day.
Right. We're unable to attend that
So-
day.
So the date for this discussion is right now undetermined with the Board of
Correct.
Finance. I
That's
see.
right.
But are they going to be given a preview before then, or not? Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.
All right. If there's no further questions or comments, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Eileen, second by Jan. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right, everybody, have a good evening, and thank you, Jan and Julie.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Good night.
Bye-bye.